Hello, everyone, and thank you for coming. I know Wednesday, the middle of the week, it's been a really big week for everyone, so I really appreciate you guys coming out. We are going to review your big assignment of Theme 2, Week 3, which is the Secondary Source Analysis Worksheet. Oh, awesome that you can hear me much better this week. Great. So we are going to work on the Secondary Source Analysis Worksheet tonight. And like last week, if you have any questions, if you can kind of hold them to the end because it's hard for me to pay attention to the chat box at the same time. Or you can write them in the chat box, but I might not answer it until the very end if that works. Everyone ready to get started? Awesome. Okay, so theme 2 is investigating history. And your big assignment for this week is the Secondary Source Analysis Worksheet. So I wanted to go over it with you guys. The goals of the Secondary Source Analysis Worksheet is to teach all of you to identify specific information to determine whether the source is going to be useful for your project. Now, since we, as I will talk about, are going to be using sources in your research kits, all of them will be on our topic, but it's going to be based on your research question and your area of interest on whether or not the secondary source is relevant or useful for your project. So that's what you're going to want to keep to the forefront of your mind. They're all going to be on the topic of the dropping of the atomic bomb, but it's the question of how are you looking at that? Are you looking at it through the military? Are you looking at it through science, medicine, all the lenses that you are thinking about this week? You want to keep all of those ideas in. Okay, what 3 questions do we want you to ask when you approach a secondary source? So first, what argument is the source's author making? And this question is what I always think of as, what is the author trying to sell you? Right? Everyone writes something because they want you to believe something. So what does the author want you to believe? That's their argument. Next, why is the source's author making this argument? What is at stake? And often you will find out that they are answering another historian, for example. So maybe in 1950, historian X said one thing about the dropping of the bomb. Well, in 1970, historian Y comes along to say why historian X was wrong 20 years earlier. So you want to know why they are saying it. Are they talking in a larger discussion? And usually they are. Most historians are responding to other historians or other arguments. Finally, and this one is very important, and it's not just important in this history class, but in all of your history classes, and really just in how we approach everything. And you're going to want to think, so how you approach everything. So where are the weak points in your source's argument? Do you see any potential bias or flaws in your source's argument? So this is the question that I like to always ask as, what's missing? But by that, I mean, what did the author deliberately leave out? Right? What hurts their argument so they don't talk about it, or they downplay it, or they only kind of mention it briefly and they don't go into detail, and why? So what is missing? What's their bias? And their bias is usually their point of view. And what we all need to realize as we approach everything, and I think we did this a lot in theme 1, especially in the debate, or not the debate, sorry, the assignment that had us going over 2 different historians and the landing of Columbus, when we have to consider bias. Every person has a bias. Every source has a bias. Some sources will be very upfront about the bias. They will be completely open and explain right from the beginning what their bias is. Other sources will just present their information as factual and will not talk about their bias, but they are still biased. Whatever the facts are that they are including demonstrates their bias. How they interpret those facts demonstrates their bias. In those cases, it can be a little harder to determine the bias, But that's why it's up to us to really ask those questions. What is the bias? So, and bias is not necessarily bad. For example, I always use Martin Luther King's letters from a Birmingham jail. Well, in his letter from a Birmingham jail, he is supporting the idea of the civil rights movement, civil disobedience, and protest. So that is his bias because he is supporting that. I think a lot of Americans, we now look back on Martin Luther King Jr. and his efforts, and so we don't necessarily see that as a negative. Well, that's because a bias is not necessarily a negative. It's just your point of view and how everything you see is filtered through that. So you really need to think about that when you're going through your secondary source worksheets. As you can tell, since I just spent quite a bit of time on it, bias is incredibly important to historians. Recognizing our own and recognizing those of others. Okay, so we will go on now. So what do you need to do first for this assignment? First, you're going to review the secondary source you read for your topic exploration worksheet. Next, you need to go to the research kit and choose another secondary source. I would choose it from the same field of study you're interested in. So if you're interested in a research question on the military, and you've already read one secondary source about that, choose another one. Then they can kind of talk to each other for you and give you more of an idea about what historians discussing, say, military history of the dropping of the atomic bomb, are interested in. Finally, you need to choose one of these sources to complete your worksheet on. All right, what does your worksheet look like? Well, when you download your worksheet, this is what it looks like, right? Nice and small and sweet and simple. But we also gave you a sample worksheet, what we want you to fill out. So this is what we give you, and this is what we hope for. This is the amount of information we want, and I'm going to go through this step by step, but I just want you to get the idea that even though this looks relatively small, we want you to fill out several lines, especially for the thesis and argument section. Okay, so let's get into what we want in each field. Full APA citation. Well, this one kind of goes without saying, but, still. So you're going to go into your research kit. Your research kit will have the author's name, the year of publication, the title, what the journal is, the page numbers. You need all of that information. That is the full citation, and you need to put that in that box. Next, you're going to identify the author and describe their potential biases. So for this, yes, you may Google the author's name. You want to learn if they are a history professor. Do they work for the government? Are they a scientist? Are they a doctor? Where are they writing? What is their point of view? What is their experience before? So in this case, Lewis Morden, he's a military historian. Before that, he worked for the U.S. Army, right? So you want to get an idea. You don't need to learn everything in the background, but you want to have an idea of what might influence their interpretation of events or even the questions they ask. Since Lewis Morden was a former member of the Army, he's obviously writing about military history. Is that going to have him therefore only ask questions that pertain to the military? Whereas a medical doctor looking at the exact same piece of evidence might ask very different questions. And so that's what we want. We just want a little bit of the background and why you think that might influence the way that person views the subject matter. Now, if it ends with that they might be biased in case of the military, but it doesn't seem to be that case, I don't think you necessarily need to include here whether or not the person seems biased, because there will be another section where we ask you to explain whether or not this source is reliable. And that's where you can say, although this person has experience with the military, overall their source is reliable because they also have many qualifications and have spent a long time working and studying. Okay, so that is the author and the potential biases. So this is where we're going to ask you to literally Google the author and try to see where they worked and who they were and what they are known for. Okay, identify the thesis and the arguments. This is, again, what they are trying to sell you. So what are the key points that the author is making that they want you to believe by the time you finish reading the article? As you can see here, there are 3 paragraphs. several sentences explaining it. And it should be an in-depth explanation, right? These articles are not necessarily short, so you should be able to get at least 8 to 10 sentence descriptions out of what they are trying to make you believe. It doesn't have to go into a lot of detail. We don't need every single fact. Just, again, what they want you to believe, what their argument is, what they are trying to sell us. What primary sources did the source rely on? This is their evidence. So as they go through, they will say, as per the reports by this doctor. Well, that's their evidence. Or, according to letters written by, that's their evidence. In President Truman's journal, that's their evidence. In the telegram received by, that's their evidence. Now, some people are going to use a lot of evidence. For example, here, Dr. Morden used many different pieces of evidence. Other people might rely only on a certain type of evidence, say x-rays or skin grafts following the dropping of the bomb. All newsreels, if they're just interested in how this information was disseminated to the public. But you want to look at what is the primary source material, what is their evidence for this argument. When they're saying Truman felt this way about the dropping of the bomb, based on what? What are they using? Is it a letter by Truman? Is it a conversation he had with someone else that they wrote down later? What is their evidence? Here's where, again, I said that we could answer whether or not the bias is too much. And again, if we have a source in your research kit, you can probably think right from the beginning that even though it is biased, because all sources are biased, it is also reliable, because we are not trying to trick you. We're not going to give you a source that we're later going to laugh and say, ha ha ha, that wasn't a good source. No, they are all good sources, but we want you to explain why. So for Dr. Morden, you could say he seems to be very knowledgeable about the military because he served in various capacities, which gives him both an insider's view as well as having researched. All of these ideas can help explain to us that you understand why, though someone is biased, they are still qualified to discuss the topic they are discussing. And again, this is not a gotcha question. All of the sources in the research kit will be qualified. We just want to understand that you understand what makes a source qualified. So how does the source relate to your project topic? How does it add to what you already know about the topic? And this is just, what did you learn? Right? Just a few sentences explaining, after having read this source, I learned. And here it's the decision to use the atomic bomb is central to the study of the end of World War II. So maybe that's not something you had realized before, how many people do discuss the dropping of the atomic bomb and whether or not it helped end the war. So that's a big argument. So that might be something that you hadn't realized. So just a few things you hadn't realized or hadn't known before you read the article. And this, again, doesn't have to be too in-depth, but it's just an idea of what is your takeaway of what is most important. Okay, so here we are. You have filled out your worksheet. So you want to make sure that you included the full citation. You explain the bias. You explain the argument. You explain the evidence. You explain why the source is reliable. And you explain what you learned about your topic from reading the source, right? We've covered it all. We are good. It is full. So what now? Well, that's all done. Go and check the rubric. There is a link right under 341 to get you right to the rubric, but I did copy and paste it here, so if you're watching this later, or I'll post the PowerPoint in the learning community. If you are using that, you will have this rubric, and it can kind of go through that this is what your instructors are using to grade your exams. Not your exams, your assignments, sorry. I hope all of you are looking at the feedback from your instructors, because this is what we use, and you're all comfortable in finding the feedback, because this will help you improve and fix work as we move through the term. So make sure you're checking the feedback. We spend a lot of time on the feedback. I know that it's literally hours every week that is spent in feedback. So you really want to make sure that you go and look at it to help for yourself. And also because if you have a question about, well, why did I not score as highly? It's in the feedback. So check there first. And then if you don't understand the feedback, definitely bring it to the instructor. So Now that you've double-checked your spelling, your grammar, and your sentence structure, you click on 341 under Theme 2 and submit your work, and then you head off. Carlene, I am your professor. Okay, all right, guys. That is my overview of your secondary source analysis. So let's get into it. What questions do you have, either about this topic or other questions about the term so far? Did this explain what you're supposed to do this week, what we have expectations for you? I see a few students are typing. Oh, awesome, Sarah. I'm very glad. As you can see, I literally go through the assignments and try to break them down. And this is also when I grade for my own students, this is also how I do it a lot of the time. That's awesome. I'm glad everybody is feeling good. The bulk of this assignment is going to be reading and analyzing the secondary source, right, for the arguments and different ideas. The actual filling in of the worksheet, once you've done that, will not be too bad. It's going to be reading and picking out the arguments as you go. Awesome. Let's see. Sorry, let me just roll up. Are the research questions? Yes, you can use the research questions listed in the research kit. You can modify them to come up with your own, but you can also decide that, no, that's really what you're interested in, and your instructor is not going to have a problem with that either. Awesome. How are we all doing so far with History 100? Are we feeling like we understand the goals and the assignments? Oh, thank you for explaining how to find the feedback. You will all get there. Historians are not made overnight. Some of us were in school for many, many years before this all started to make sense to us, me. But yes, we will all get there. Yeah, I think breaking it down makes it a lot easier for all of us. Because I think it's definitely good to break it down into the step by step of what we need to all do as we approach history. Yes, so I am going to try and make sure that we do these each Wednesday. I did not do it the first week just because the learning community and setting up the Adobe room, it was a little tricky. But from now on, I believe I will be doing them each Wednesday, picking the biggest assignment of the week and trying to break it down with you guys. If you are finding it hard to understand, you can always, again, email your instructor or just come to the learning community, right? It's us. I'm in there. A peer tutor is in there. Natalie Sweet, another learning community facilitator, is there. And so we can potentially also help you because Natalie and I both teach this course. So even though every instructor has a different style, we still understand the assignments and what's expected in the course. So just stop on by the learning community if you have any questions, and we can also work with you there. Again, I'll be doing these every Wednesday for the big assignment. And I do them on Wednesday since they're due on Sunday. That should give you guys enough time in case you have to hold off. I know, we're all working and doing 50 billion things. So you didn't have to respond to a classmate on the discussion board, I believe, by today. But we did want you to post it. So the learning community, your instructor should have posted a web address, but let me actually get the web address right now and put that up for you. I will, of course, now that I've tried to do that, I'm clicking on the incorrect thing. Okay. All right, where? There we go. All right, here. That is the web address. I just put that in the window. All right, good in that area. Wow, you are an excellent peer tutor right now. This is very helpful. The 20th and the discussion is due by 11:59, right? Yes, so the response is not until next Sunday because it's a 2-week long assignment. We wanted the discussion post to carry off over 2 weeks. So that is the learning community one. So good, I'm glad. As you are going through choosing everything, if you have any questions, make sure that you do. If you can reach out to your instructor at any time. I know that we respond within 24 hours. Sometimes it can be a lot sooner. I like it when my students reach out to me because I'm the one grading you guys, so it kind of makes it easier on my end if we solve all the problems before you submit an assignment and something isn't quite there, and then I might ask you to resubmit it, and then it's just a lot easier if we reach out right from the beginning. So I definitely strongly encourage reaching out to the instructor because I know from on my end that I like it when students contact me. That is great. That's awesome. Yeah, no, I think we, your instructors, we obviously A, want you guys to do well, but B, if we can work out any issues over the course of the week, then it's just easier for all of us involved. That's awesome. This is really good news, guys. I'm very glad. You might need to ask your instructor. I have at times suggested that students revise, especially if it's a big part of the course, because I want to make sure we're on the right track. And then different instructors have different rules, different ideas. But I would email your instructor and just see what they think about that. Cool. Yes, I know him. All right. Does anyone have any more questions? I'm going to put up the PowerPoint in the learning community tonight, and then I am going to hopefully get the webinar, the recorded webinar, up by tomorrow night. It should be up by tomorrow night. I will hopefully get it up by tomorrow morning, but definitely tomorrow night. Awesome. Thank you, guys. You were a very good audience. You were very helpful. I appreciated the additional feedback on what dates everything is due. But yes, we need a discussion post by tomorrow, but you don't need a response until next Sunday. Thank you, guys. All right, I'm going to stop recording in about 10 seconds. Just make sure I got all the questions. Okay, yes, it looks like I got all the questions. Again, come and see us in the learning community if you have any questions.